This is the second Ivy pocketbook. If you didn't read the first one, Ivy is a wild 12-year-old in London with a penchant for making up random nonsense. She's constantly rude to everyone, and she is destined to be the savior of another world because she is partly dead.
Argo Funk Book Review. Argo Funk Book Review.
This review is commissioned through Patreon. Ivy has been adopted by coffin makers named the Snagsbys. Ezra is pretty relaxed, while Mother Snagsby is uptight and throws fits over Ivy's mishaps. The Snagsbys regularly visit dying people to take their measurements, while Ivy reads poetry. Mother Snagsby forces Ivy to drink warm milk during every trip. As soon as Ivy drinks the milk, she falls unconscious. This happens all the time. It's pretty ominous, but Ivy is not particularly smart, so she figures she's just sleepy whenever she visits a deathbed. Ivy meets the villains from the previous book, because new readers need to know the Butterfields hate Ivy. They blame her for Rebecca's death, but Ivy has a vision of Rebecca running away. She assumes Rebecca's still alive somewhere. Ivy befriends a timid librarian named Miss Carnage, who constantly talks about the occult. Totally normal behavior, I'm sure. Miss Carnage. That's such a weird name. It should be obvious this person's a secret villain. Anyway, Miss Carnage says there's a secret book at the library, which would be just perfect for a partly dead girl who sees ghosts and wants to travel to another world. Ivy meets a dazzling stranger named Estelle Dumblebee. Her older brother Sebastian disappeared 13 years ago. He visited the Snagsbys several times. Estelle wants Ivy to find out what happened to Sebastian. Mother Snagsby denies everything. She also refuses to talk about the secret book she takes everywhere. Ivy has another vision where Rebecca begs her to stay away. That only increases Ivy's resolve to save Rebecca. She steals the occult book from the library. Written in blank pages are secret instructions on how to visit the other world. All Ivy has to do is hold the clock diamond and focus on Rebecca. Ivy tries, but crossing over makes so much noise it attracts the attention of Mother Snagsby. Ivy offers to give Mother a special bath. While Mother's eyes are closed, Ivy swings a bucket at her head and knocks her out. This scene is illustrated. We get a picture of Ivy attacking an elderly woman in the bath. I know it's supposed to be funny slapstick, but it just made me feel uncomfortable. It's just not a nice scene. Ivy is disappointed to find the secret book has a lock. The family has a tea party with guests. Ivy makes them a birthday cake, only she accidentally cooks it with gunpowder instead of flour. The cake explodes, almost killing everyone. For some unfathomable reason, the guests are upset when they leave. The Duchess of Trinity, a ghost from the previous book, reappears. Again, she pretends she needs Ivy's help for a noble mission, when in reality, it's obvious she's just using Ivy to get revenge against a relative. In return for Ivy's help, the Duchess explains the other world is called Prospa. Rebecca is there, being held captive in Prospa House. Ivy crosses over to Prospa. She breaks into the building, but it's a trap. Ivy is captured by guards, who brag they'll receive a handsome reward for getting her. Ivy escapes them by crossing back over to the real world. This part of the book was the most interesting to me, but sadly, Ivy doesn't go back to Prospa at all in the next 200 pages. Instead, she talks to the Dumbledees, who have information they really should have mentioned sooner. Sebastian fell in love with a dark-haired woman named Anastasia Radcliffe. Ivy thinks it's Gretel, the Snagsby's daughter, who's out of the country at the moment. Estelle sees a picture of Gretel and confirms they're different women. There's a minor continuity error here. In the picture that ends chapter 16, Gretel is quite blonde. In all of the other pictures, she has dark hair, as the story says. The Snagsbys take a secret trip every weekend. Ivy follows them and sees they go to a graveyard. Gretel isn't out of the country. She died over 30 years ago, at age 6. Ivy tries to cheer Mother Snagsby up by tying her up with rope and then putting a frog on her face. Ivy is surprised when Mother doesn't like this. The Snagsbys visit a client. This time, Ivy doesn't drink all of her milk. As a result, she wakes up just in time to see Mother Snagsby attempting to kill the client with the clock diamond. Ivy fights Mother, and her secret book is knocked open. Inside is a list of all of their victims, including Sebastian Dumblebee. Ivy runs away, and the book takes an unexpected turn. The Butterfields get revenge on Ivy by kidnapping her and locking her in a madhouse for 50 pages. To be fair, Ivy says mad things half the time. It doesn't take much to convince the people there that Ivy is mentally unfit. Ivy gives special attention to a mad woman who hums nursery rhymes. A boy named Jago works at the madhouse. He develops a fondness for Ivy, and he helps her escape. Ivy visits the Dumbledees, who have more big secrets to reveal. Again, they should have told Ivy everything from the start, instead of keeping secrets and revealing them at the most dramatic moments possible. It makes me wonder if they're actually trying to find Sebastian or not. As it turns out, the woman Sebastian fell in love with is from Prospa. He went to Prospa so he could be with her. She came back with a baby, at which point the Dumbledees sent her to the madhouse. She is the woman who hums nursery rhymes. The baby was sent away with a maid. She disappeared around the same time Ivy appeared at an orphanage with amnesia. Gee, that sure is a coincidence, isn't it? I wonder if the third book is going to come back to this story. Ivy leaves and finds Miss Frost from the last book. Miss Frost explains the clock diamond doesn't kill people, not exactly. It sends them to Prospa, where they have healing powers. They can cure about 100 people of the plague before disappearing into nothingness. By using the clock diamond on dying people, the Snagsbys are helping fight the plague. A noble goal, to be sure, but they're clearly not telling people all of the details ahead of time. They're just indiscriminately sending people to Prospa House to be kept as prisoners for healing purposes. Miss Frost is hit by a poison dart before she can reveal too much plot information. Miss Carnage reveals she is last book's villain in disguise. She attempts to capture Ivy, but Ivy is saved by the ghost of the Duchess of Trinity. Ivy leaves with Miss Frost. Miss Frost deliberately avoids giving direct answers to Ivy's questions, and she throws amnesia powder in Ivy's face. I'm starting to suspect Miss Frost is not the best guardian ever. Frost takes Ivy and Jago to a distant cottage. She orders them to hide there until she returns. Ivy has no intention of doing this. She grabs the clock diamond and goes back to London. The end. Post-book follow-up. I think this is an improvement over the first book. There are more storylines with moving parts, although it would be nice if someone ever bothered to sit Ivy down and explain the truth to her. I can understand why the Dumbledees didn't want to confess they had the mother of their grandchildren committed, and I can understand why the Snagsbys didn't want to confess they are doing something which is very similar to murder. I can't understand why Miss Frost never tells Ivy anything about the clock diamond or Prospa. That's the one I don't understand. Keeping Ivy in the dark about these things just makes it dangerous for her. If Miss Frost had told Ivy the truth, well, I guess the book wouldn't have happened. But still, Miss Frost is a terrible guardian. Since Ivy is partly dead, she cannot be injured, and she has magic healing powers. I'm surprised these things don't come up more often. One problem I had with the previous book was that it's hard to tell which of Ivy's flights of fancy are to be taken seriously and which ones are jokes. This problem arises towards the start of the book. In Chapter 4, there's a wild chase scene where Ivy thinks she's following a monster. In Chapter 7, there's a similar chase scene after last book's culprit, but this one is real. The real chase comes so soon after the joke chase, it's hard not to assume it's just another slapstick sequence. Like the first book, I didn't enjoy the humor. All of the slapsticks sort of fell flat for me, besides for the exploding cake scene. I also didn't like the jokes of Ivy being rude to other people. Some of her offbeat quips are funny, but overall it just is not humor that appeals to me. I don't like the formatting of this book. It is double-spaced with small font. I think if they printed it with normal spacing and normal font, it would be about 250 pages. The pictures are quite good, I wouldn't get rid of them. Overall, I think this is a worthy successor to the first book. If you like the first one, you'll probably like this one. It's better in some aspects, although it's not such a huge improvement that I could say I thoroughly enjoyed it and I have a monstrous desire to read the third book in the trilogy. I'll give it the same score as the first one. I give Somebody Stop Ivy Pocket a 4 out of 10.